All right, high rollers. UFC 211 is in the books, and by all accounts, a pretty damn good card. Few spectacular fights, couple of knockouts, and some controversy. Here to chat with us about it today is Michael Marr, poker junkie, MMA fan, and obstacle racer. There's a great shot of him running the Reebok Spartan race on Twitter, at Michael Marbled on Twitter. Might as well call this segment UFC Marbled. Michael, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being a high roller today.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, great job. You were 4 out of 5 on your predictions on Twitter. The one you didn't get was the Alvarez Poirier. That was a no contest, though, right?
Hey, does that count as a no bet?
That's right. That's a push.
Technically, I'm pretty sure that'd be a loss if it was a real bet, but anyhow.
Well, let's start with that fight because first of all, the preliminaries were absolutely great, weren't they? I mean, you had that Chase Sherman fight with the vicious battle. It was a knockout. Jason Knight looked impressive in his victory.
Jason Knight was great for sure.
Yeah, he sparkled in his fight there. And how about the prelim main? Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez. It was a knock 'em down affair, and it was vicious. And I thought Poirier was going to win that fight, but Alvarez gained control and kind of took the knees to him, didn't he?
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So what do you think about the outcome of that? I mean, obviously they were illegal knees. Herb Dean called it a no contest. I found it fascinating that we actually got to listen into Herb Dean talking to that UFC official outside the octagon.
Yeah, the guy he was talking to is Mark Ratner. Mark Ratner's been in legislation, and I believe he was the former commissioner of the Nevada State Athletic Commission prior to, I think, 3 commissioners ago. Anyway, he does a lot of great work. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Herb Dean is tied for number 1 with Big John for like best referee in the sport, hands down. There's differences in the rules of mixed martial arts, whereas the quote-unquote unified rules, now there's 2 different rule sets. Some states are adopting them, some are not. And that doesn't even get into what rules, people like and people don't like. But I think the most important aspect of that is that the UFC, being the driving body in the sport, they need to come up with a rule set that they can bring to the commissions and say, this is the rule set that we want you to apply. Now, obviously, there's issues if you're going to have the promotional body also having a hand in the regulatory aspect of things. You don't want to have the promotion self-regulating, but they're doing that already when they're operating internationally in areas that don't have a regulatory body. They need to be like they did when they were trying to clean up the sport and going to regulation instead of going away from regulation, which is where they were struggling when they weren't on TV and the quote-unquote dark ages of the sport. They just need to continue to do that, where they find the rule set that they want to present in their product and give that to the commissions and say, please execute this rule set. As long as they're not changing it on the regular, then it's not really an issue of the promotion having a hand in the regulation, in my opinion.
Absolutely. They've got to unify those rules. They got to be the same everywhere. I mean, you got to be thinking about your opponent's fist coming at your face and not about the specific rules of that state.
For sure. And I think there was a really good point that was made in regards to, if I remember correctly, I was listening to Big John McCarthy talking about the Gegard Mousasi, Chris Weidman debacle. Were they legal knees? Were they not legal knees? I think the best point that could be made there is, if you're busy trying to put your hands on the ground and deem yourself a downed opponent to protect yourself from knees, that's not actually protecting your head from knees.
Right.
You could be using your arms to protect your head from knees, or you could be trying to change position. So I think that's the better perspective to take on it. Now, I mean, that whole scenario was chaos. Like almost every Alvarez fight, if he takes damage, it's just madness after that. I lean towards, the way the scenario started, where Alvarez was holding a choke. You heard DC talking in the commentary about maybe he should stay here and rest. That's what he would do. It's not exactly Alvarez's style from what I've seen. Anyway, he's just 90 seconds earlier was in all kinds of trouble, had no idea what was going on, literally had his eyes closed and just swinging wild. So I'm not going to necessarily hold him to being in his highest frame of mind. So when a one fighter is in that kind of quasi downed position where it began, where Poirier was supporting his weight on his feet, he has one hand down on the mat as quote unquote playing the game, as Dean tends to call it. It's not supporting weight. Technically speaking, yes, it is an illegal strike because if he's got his hand on the mat, he's considered a downed opponent. The reason for that is if you're a downed opponent, it's hard to defend yourself from kicks and knees and stuff to the head. That's why the rule's in place. But when people are deliberately just touching their fingers to the mat, not supporting weight, it's, kind of cheating the rules. So as I've heard it from being a fan for a long time, you'll consistently hear the referees talking about explaining the rules ahead of time, and a lot of the time they do explain to the fighters that, look, if you're not supporting weight, if your hand goes away, you fall on your face, then they're not going to count that as an illegal strike. Also, you got to look at it like Alvarez is just probably still a little bit out of it. The position that he has, Alvarez's head is behind Poirier's back, so he doesn't have line of sight to see that. So I can't really say that Herb Dean's wrong in not really being able to say that that was a malicious strike, therefore it should be a no contest instead of a disqualification. It absolutely sucks for Poirier for sure because, he doesn't get his win bonus, which arguably he was, more successful in the fight up to that point in terms of scoring. But I can't really say that a no contest is incorrect when you got like one of the best guys in the business in there making the call.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Herb Dean as well, and he has to make that decision in real time. We've got the advantage of instant
Yep.
replay, which brings up the question, what about instant replay in the UFC for situations like that? It would delay the fight, obviously, give a guy a chance to rest, but maybe it's needed in certain spots. I don't know.
I mean, instant replay definitely has its place. I think that kind of a decision as to when instant replay should be involved should fall on the referee. That way, it's not up to, it doesn't make it a logistical nightmare. In that situation, I don't think instant replay was so relevant because, Herb Dean had the proper vantage point at the time. He understood exactly what was going on. He understood that Alvarez didn't have line of sight because of where his head positioning was. And, he even conferred with Mark Ratner before, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I've seen. I tried to stop it, but it was crazy loud at the time because it was a madness fight and the crowd was going crazy. So I don't think it's at all unreasonable for that decision to be made. Coming from my background, at least in working in the gaming industry in poker, where you got to go with the fairest ruling, correct?
Absolutely. And they got to run that back anyway. That was a spectacular fight,
Sure.
wasn't it?
Oh, I just hope that it's a main event. If it gets run back again, put that as a 5-rounder. Not that it'll go 5 rounds, I expect, but let's not, take away that opportunity.
And you got to give Poirier some credit as well, the way he calmed down the crowd because it was quite upset. He was on his way to victory, it looked like, and he really handled that with class.
Oh, for sure. Poirier understands it's not Alvarez's fault per se. It's more the legality issues and the red tape and stuff. If you listen to other stuff, other fighters talk about it. Chael Sonnen, Anderson Silva too. There was a lot of controversy in that scenario. Was the knee strike that Anderson landed on Chael while he was down and back up against the cage? Was it to the chest? Was it to the head? Blah blah blah. You listen to Sonnen afterwards, and he's like, "Yeah, it hurt. It was to the head anyway, but I didn't like that rule anyway. I'm not going to make any excuses." I think that's a great way to handle it. Poirier was not going to let that crowd boo, Alvarez, who's a straight up Hall of Famer in the future. Couldn't agree more in terms of he handled it great. Super frustrating. It sucks for him because he probably doesn't make very much for the level of a UFC fighter that he's been for the last 5 years. He's probably not making nearly enough, in my opinion, but hopefully that looks up for him in the future.
I'll tell you what, he really looked good in that fight, and they definitely have to run that back. I was just on your Twitter page, man, again, at Michael Marbold, and you posted 2 of your favorite quotes from UFC 211. Joanna, blessed mother of violence, and death, taxes, and Damian Maia taking your back.
Yeah, those I caught those from various MMA journalists, I believe Sean Al-Shadi and Jed Mishu, who both do work for MMAfighting.com. And so I can't take credit for those, but those are what stuck out to me the most.
Well, let's talk about Maia versus Jorge Masvidal. Big risk for Maia, right? He's in contention, in line for a title shot. He takes the fight with a very tough character, and it was one hell of a fight. But Maia's just too good when he gets a hold of you.
Oh, it's unquestionable. He's arguably the best guy to ever do it, and couldn't be a classier guy. I was super worried because, like, emotionally, with following the story over time, like I've been following Maia since before he fought Anderson Silva way back. I was really hoping that he would get the win decisively, so that they wouldn't be able to potentially, not give him the title shot against Woodley next. And the way this fight went, like, I would have scored it for Maia. I would like to think that that was not particularly biased in saying that. That being said, I certainly couldn't argue, you could have a split decision for Masvidal pretty easily if you were just looking in terms of the damage aspect of it, whereas he couldn't stop progression, but he was able to stop any major threats of submission, and he was able to do a lot of damage. So, I mean, I thought the fight was pretty much split down the middle, but, more of the fight was controlled by Maia, so I don't think that was wrong at all.
You got to give Masvidal some credit. I mean, not many people can go the full 3 rounds with Maia, especially when he gets you to the ground. So Masvidal had some good defense, and when they stood up, I mean, he was dominant. And at some points there, I thought Maia was just so fatigued he was going to lose that fight. Do you believe Dana White that Maia gets the title shot now against Woodley?
I certainly hope so. Like, I mean, looking at the division, I can't see anybody else that I feel should be fighting for the title next, more so, even close. Look, I can't say that I'm particularly optimistic for Maia when I'm looking at him matched up with Tyron Woodley, because, look, Maia's takedowns are not particularly good. They've never been great. That's why he struggled with Anderson. That's why he's always had struggles with guys with particularly good wrestling, counter wrestling, and defensive jiu-jitsu. But, oh man, you can't help but thinking, unless he gets knocked out, eventually he's going to get a hold of him. And once he gets a hold of you, well, he's going to be on your back for the rest of the round if you can survive that long.
And quickly, how do you see that title fight playing out, Maia versus Woodley? I mean, Maia's got to dodge the punches, but if he gets Woodley, I don't like his chances.
Personally, I would definitely favor Woodley, but, I mean, I won't count him out.
All right, okay. The other quote was in respect to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and man, she's quite a champion. She puts damage on her opponents. She's got that vicious left jab. But every time I watch her fight, something tells me she's beatable if someone can just get inside. I mean, Andrade was trying to get inside, and she took a lot of damage doing so.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to say that she's a perfect fighter, because, I mean, really, it's hard to point at anyone and say that that's the case. There's always, even Demetrius Johnson has, aspects to his game that are mildly exploitable, but her game is so well-rounded overall, and her striking is, I've heard lots of people saying, and I can't help but agree, that she's probably the most technically sound striker in the entire sport, regardless of gender. For example, look at the takedowns that occurred between Joanna Champion and Andrade versus David Branch and Jotko. The Branch-Jotko. Branch-Jotko, there was several times where Branch landed the takedown, and, like, when it was in the center of the ring, there's that brief moment of acceptance from Jotko when he's on his back on the ground. He's like, "Oh, this is bad." Look at the takedowns that Andrade landed on Joanna. The second she's hitting the ground, she's already starting to get back up. There's zero acceptance. There's like, yeah, you might get the takedown. Guess what? It's not going to last very long.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the reason I say I think she looks beatable is because she has been hit in the face a few times, and she's got such a tiny, frail, thin-looking package that you think she'll go down, but man, is she tough.
Oh, she's just a killer. She just, like, I love her because she seems super, like, a really nice, normal, non-savage person when you see all the content of her out in the world and in the lead-up promotional material. But when she's turned on, oh, she's just cold-blooded, just ruthless.
Now, is her future a two-division champion?
She easily could claim it. I don't know how long she would be able to hold on to both of those things, but I mean that's not exactly the way it seems to be going. The way the sport's been going, in terms of like if you're going to get two titles, you're probably not going to spend all your time defending both. You're right. She definitely is hittable. Yeah, I don't necessarily chalk that up to her having poor defense, as maybe a lot of her opponents are legitimate in terms of their offense as well. But she's never taken. I've never seen her taking a whole lot of damage where I thought she was really in a lot of danger. And I mean, especially with like the kind of damage that we've seen her wear, like yeah, I've never had a hematoma. I'm sure it sucks, but it's also very visible. Something like that versus just taking a big hit to the side of the head. When you take a blow to the side of the head, it rattles your brain around a lot more than if you were to take it in the front of the crown. So anything that's cosmetic, people think it is a little bit more significant than it is, when it might just literally be cosmetic.
All right, two more fights to talk about. We'll save Stipe and Junior Dos Santos for next. But right now, how about Frankie Edgar and Yair Rodriguez? And you called it. You said Frankie Edgar was going to win this fight. I was in disbelief because, I don't know, this young guy, Yair, he's such a great fighter, and I thought he was going to put it to Frankie. But man, the veteran used those wily street smarts to really put the heat on this guy. That eye was in bad shape.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it seemed to me, I haven't rewatched it, but from what I could recall, even watching it live, they even called it in the commentary that it didn't seem like they were doing the proper work on reducing the swelling on that eye. Not to say that it probably wouldn't have closed up anyway, because Frankie targeted it really well in the second round to make sure that he put more work on it. The reason I was so high on Frankie in that spot is like Frankie's got no glaring holes in his game. Like, he's only been losing to Jose Aldo recently, who, even though he got knocked out super fast by McGregor, he's the greatest featherweight we've ever seen. No question. So Frankie's got no major holes. So he's always going to be able to target somebody else's weakness, and if their weakness is his strength of being wrestling and relentless pace, yeah, they're going to be in a rough time. Don't get me wrong, Yair Rodriguez is a fantastic talent. I think there's going to be great things from him in the future, and I'm not going to miss his fights. But the style of fighting that he's applying is extremely flashy, and in my opinion, while he does have very high level of skill in these high risk, high reward techniques, that in the right setups, he can showcase them and he looks great. But I don't necessarily know that he puts the same amount of effort into the fundamental aspects of his mixed martial arts game. And if you don't have the fundamentals as solid, and all you're doing is trying these high risk, high reward stuff, when you get a bad matchup, it's going to be a rough night.
Absolutely, and it certainly was a rough night. And I got to give it to Frankie Edgar, man. I always think he's the underdog, and he continuously surprises me. Does he have another title shot in him?
I think he's more than physically and mentally sound. Like, the guy could easily win another title today. Whether he's going to get that opportunity, who knows? It's tricky right now. Like, it's going to be tough to sell to pretty much anybody to Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar 3 when, it's been 1 year since the last time he beat him. I don't think that Edgar had a particularly good showing in that one. I remember his coach, Mark Henry, is fantastic. He took a lot of the blame for not really coaching him well enough for that. Now, if it's Holloway, if Holloway wins the unification bout coming up, then I think you can potentially say, okay, well, let's give it to Aldo a second time because, of what he's accomplished in the sport. Or let's just put Frankie in there because he's clearly the next best guy in the division behind Aldo and Holloway.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see how a lot of these divisions play out with the new ownership. Very interesting times in the UFC. Okay, Cleveland would say that we've saved the best for last. the title fight, the heavyweight division, Stipe Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos. They fought in 2014, and man, has Stipe improved a lot since then.
No question. That's why I was leaning towards Stipe going into this fight. The boost in confidence that he got from that fight, where he knew that he belonged after that. Not to mention that the relentless terror against legends that he's been fighting since then. What I believe it's five performance of the nights in a row. Is it 5 knockouts or 4? I could be wrong, but I mean they're all finishes.
Yeah, I mean, he's been amazing. And, for a little while there, the game plan that Dos Santos had of kicking that leg, that lead leg, seemed to be working. And at one point, I said to myself, one more kick to that leg and it's over. And for some reason, that kick never came. It seemed like Stipe knew he was in trouble and picked up the pace a bit.
Oh, for sure. I agree completely. Just the first 1 or 2 kicks to that calf kick. It's not so much the thigh leg kick that most fighters go after, which lands a little bit above the knee, but this one targets the calf, which is something that you saw Frankie Edgar do against Benson Henderson in their fights. There was also a fight in Bellator, but I don't recall exactly the fighters involved. I believe it was one of the Pitbull Freres, where it actually broke his leg. Yeah, it's super effective, and right away you could tell that it was really bothering Stipe, and you could see the swelling as well. We're kind of seeing the same thing from Dos Santos. He likes to move backward and work on the counter, but his understanding of his positioning in the ring is still terrible. He keeps putting his back against the cage, which is where he always struggles. Everyone that has success against JDS is when his back's against the cage, and he's voluntarily doing it. I mean, he was being successful, but I was frustrated to see the same issues with his game. But, I mean, you can't not give it to Stipe because, you could tell it was bothering him, and he's all like, okay, well, I guess I got to seal the deal.
And man, oh man, did he seal the deal or what? He ties the record for title defenses with 2: Randy Couture, Tim Sylvia, Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, the others. Hard to believe that that's the record for title defenses. But when it comes to that division, the heavyweights, I mean, it's just one punch and it's over, right?
Yeah, pretty much any division above 170, 185, some of these guys land clean. It's hard to survive that, but certainly at heavyweight for sure. The way he's been going lately with the improvements that he's been making, how decisive he's been making the victories. Sure, Stipe gets hit as well, but is a lot less than he had been previously. Pretty sure that he's got to be favored to beat that stretch the way things are going.
He's definitely got some heavy hands, and it was an emotional Junior Dos Santos in the post-fight press conference. He said, I wanted to win this fight so bad, but if I'm not the champion, I'm glad it's Stipe. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, everyone seems to say that JDS might be one of the nicest guys in the sport. Certainly outside of the cage anyway. Inside of the cage, definitely not the nicest.
I'll tell you what, I'm not going to take anything away from anybody who gets inside that octagon to face off against a guy like Stipe Miocic. I mean, it takes a lot of guts, I'll tell you that. UFC 211 is in the books. Episode 1 of UFC Marbled is now in the books. Michael Marr, at Michael Marbled on Twitter. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk soon.
No problem. Thanks for having me.